Hello, 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 everybody. This is Professor West, and welcome back to Java. This week, I'm going to be telling you about arrays. And as you can see, I already have a simple program up and running. I invite you to do the same. I left the scanner command inside my void so that I can do input and output statements in a minute. Other than that, it's a blank program. But before we get to that, I want to explain what an array is. Up until now, we've dealt with variables that all had one value. X equals 5, remember? So we would say something like int x, and then throughout our program we could say x equals 5, and then later maybe x equals 10 or whatever. A variable only has one value. An array has numerous values. I like to say that an array is just a variable that can have more than one value. So how do we do that? Let me give you a graphical representation of an array. Check this out for just a second. You have the name of the array. In this case, I'm going to call mine num. Num array, that's a better name. And then you have what we call indexes. An index is simply the number that refers to each spot in the array, and each spot in the array is called an element. Just like weather elements, rain, snow, all that. It's called an element. So, in my num array, if I have, let's say, 52 in this spot, we would say this is at spot 0, or index 0. And let's say I have 26, 85, 14, 75, and let's keep going a little bit. 63, 95, 84, 12, 15. Okay, so if I were to say, look at num array at element 5, it would be here, and the value would be 63. Now notice, we started with 0, so this is actually the 6th spot. But the index is 5 because we started at 0. So even though there's only 0 through 9, this is a 10 element array if you count it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This can be a little confusing sometimes, but if you ever get mixed up and you have one extra, like if I tried to point to element 10, I would get an error that would talk about, quote, out of bounds, which simply means that you tried to point to a number that doesn't exist. Anytime you see array out of bounds, or anything out of bounds when dealing with your array, that's what it means. That's all that error means. But that'll be easy for you to fix now. So, what the good thing about doing it this way is, until now, I would have had to have 10 different variables. So I would have had A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. So if I wanted to check to see if any of them had the value of 84, I would have to say, does A have the value of 84? Or if A has the value of 84, do this. If B has the value of 84, do this. If C. Now I say num at 0, and then I can simply put that in a loop, which we've already talked about, and add 1. So the next time it would check spot 1, then it would check spot 2, then it would check spot 3, and eventually I would get down and I would find my 84, and I would tell it to stop looping and do something accordingly. So this gives me the opportunity to, instead of having, before I would have had to have an if statement for each line and whatever I wanted to have happen, which would be 20 lines of code here, I could do it all with about 4 lines of code. And I mean, that may not sound like a huge difference, but what if I had 10,000 elements in this array? Well, it would still only take my 4 or 5 lines of code to search all of it and have something output because of it. So the more numbers you store in your array, the more powerful this becomes. So let's jump right in and use one. First, there's 2 different kinds of arrays. Let me bring my little picture back up. This is called a single dimensional array because I only have one set of numbers. If I had a second set, then it would be a 2-dimensional array. And of course I could have a third set and a fourth set and whatever. But if I have 2, that's a 2-dimensional array. That's a little more difficult, and we'll not worry about that. Let's just stick with single-dimensional arrays for now. So basically, everything we do, you can visualize it just like this. So, how do we create one? There's actually 3 different ways that you can create your array. And I don't know why they did this, but I could say int num array, and I could put my bracket here and a semicolon. I could have also, and I don't know why they did it this way, I could have chosen to put the brackets right here, or I could have chosen to put the brackets right here instead of at the end. Any of those ways would work, but this is the most traditional way, and that's the way that I choose to do it myself. And you're welcome to play around, see which way works better for you, but for me, I like to have the name of the array and then the bracket. Now, when we get to using it, you'll use it the same way. This is just declaring it, which is, creating it. So, this is part of how you declare your array. Once I come up with this, then I actually have to do something else before it could work. I have int num array, and then I have to put equals new int, because this is an integer, another bracket, and then how many spaces I want. So I did 10 a while ago, and then my semicolon. Now, here's what this is doing. This is saying that I'm creating an array called numArray. It's going to be a new array, and it's going to be integer 10, which means it's going to be an integer type that has 10 values. So just like in my previous one, they will be numbered 0 through 9. And the computer will automatically do that because it automatically starts with 0. So now it's a simple matter of using it. I could say num array. Let's see. I could go through and say num array 0 equals, and whatever I want, 56. And then num array in spot 1 equals 23. And then num array, and I can go through all of them like this. Obviously, as you can see, this is a little cumbersome. Equals 34. I can keep going until I get to 9. I could also use an input statement that says please enter a number, and then I accept whatever they put and store it the exact same way. So there's one other way you could do it. You can create your array, and then you could, let's delete these, you could say something like num array bracket equals, and then you have to put a brace, and then I could say something like 56 comma 38 comma 12 comma 98 comma 34 23. I'm putting spaces in here. You do not have to put spaces in there. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 and 10. So what's going to happen here when the computer reads this, it doesn't like it. Why is it not liking it? It thinks it's not a statement. Oh, it doesn't like the spaces. My apologies. I teach a lot of different languages, and in many of them you can put the space in there, and apparently in this one you cannot. And it still doesn't like it. Let's find out why. Why does it not like this? Oh, I see. When I created it, this is actually when you're creating your array, you initialize it like this. Otherwise, you need to do it the hard way. So, this is when you know the values at the beginning, and these are the values that I'm going to start with. Now, these are not locked in. At any point, I can come in and say numArray 3, 0, 1, 2, 3 now equals 15, and this one would be 15 now. This just gives us the starting values, just like it did when we assigned our variables, and we assigned them all to 0 at the beginning. So what can we do now? Let's say for int, and I'm going to call my variable count. I like using count for my counter variable, equals 0. Remember doing for loops, of course. While count is less than num array dot length semicolon count plus plus. Now, what did I just do here? Very simply put, my num array is, well, my array is called num array. So when I put the name of the array and I put dot length, that tells the computer that whatever the length is, in this case it's 10, because there's 10 places. So while count is less than 10, keep looping. This is very useful because if I change it and I make this 15 places or 20 places or 1,000 places, this dot length doesn't have to change because it's automatically going to know, because it checks every time it runs this for loop, it checks to see how big my array is. So let's say system dot out dot print line, and I'm going to say num array bracket count. So what happens is count will start off at 0. And is 0 less than the length of the array? Yes, it is. So it's going to come down here and it's going to output num array at spot 0, which is the very top place, which will be 54. This is a print line statement, so it'll also move down to the next line. It'll loop and it'll add 1 to it. So num array will now be, or count will now be 1. So is 1 less than the length of the array? Yes, it is. So then it'll output whatever's at spot 1, which is 38. Let's test it and see if that's what happens. Running 54, then 38, then 12, then 98, all the way down till we got to 12. So as you can see, this, instead of having to go through and have a different if statement or whatever for each one, or a different output statement, I'm now able to do it this way. This helps so much, especially when the program gets larger. Because larger programs, I mean, you could have a program that has 10,000 different things in your array, and you definitely do not want to have 10,000 if statements plus all the corresponding output statements and everything else. That is just ridiculously bad. I actually do work on the side from time to time updating programs for small and mid-sized companies, and I walked into a program one time that was written like that, and the program was over 800 pages of code just because the guy didn't know how to do an array and a loop that had written the program. I mean, he got it to work using variables, which was actually really impressive, but it would have been so much easier. I went through and changed everything into this kind of a format, and I cut the whole program down to like 30 pages of code. It was amazing. But anyway, this can save you an awful lot of time and effort. So let's do something else with it. Let's change a little bit. Let's say system.out.println, please, gotta have the quote, please enter a number and then let's have a variable. I'm going to call it num, and I'm going to create one called index, which I'll use in just a minute. So num equals input dot next int and why do you not like that? Oh, because I called it scanner. Scanner.nextInt. Okay. And then system.out.println, what index would you like to change, and index equals scanner dot next int. So what I'm going to do here is, now I'm going to say num array at index equals num. So one time when we run this program, it's going to come up, it's going to assign all these values to this array, and then it's going to ask me to enter a different number. So let's say I enter 43, and it's going to accept it as num. Then it's going to come through and it's going to say, what index would you like to change? And let's say I say 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, 34 would now be replaced by 43. Let's give that a try one time real quick. Please enter a number. 25. What index would you like to change? I'm going to say 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 34 should now be 25 when it runs. So let's test it. 54, 38, 12, 98, 25. Right there. That's the one that we just changed. And it is as simple as that, guys. Now, I could come up and I could have inside this, right now I have it output every single line. But what if I only wanted to say if num array count equals, let's have, well, you know what, let's just use num. I'm going to change that just a little bit, and I'm going to use num. So now I'm giving it a value to search for. I'm just going to skip this, skip that, and I'm going to say, I'm going to change this so it says, what number would you like to search for? So if I enter, let's say 15, then this should come down now, go through everything until it, why are you telling me that's, hold on now. Oh, Java, gotta use 2 equal signs. Huh. Okay, one equal sign assigns it, remember? So it would assign the value to checks. So now, whatever number I'm searching for, it's going to go through and it's going to search the first spot, the second spot, the third spot, and it's only going to print it if it finds it. So let's test it. What number would you like to search for? Well, I need to search for one that I know is there, so I'm going to search for 56. And it outputted 56. It didn't tell me what spot or anything because I didn't tell it to. I could say system.out.println index plus count. So now it should tell me, actually I want to go in and add, actually I don't need to add that because it's going to be on a whole new line, isn't it? So let's try that. What number would you like to search for? Let's do 56 again. Index 6, because I didn't have spaces. So that would tell me that it's in the 6th spot. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the beautiful part of this is, let's say this one's also 56, and maybe this one's 56. And when I search for it, I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm going to say found at index. So now it'll come up with a better message. And it says, what would you like to find? Let's say 56. And it says, found it index 0, found it index 6, and found it index 9. So every time I found it, I had it output this line of code, which actually I should have moved over a little bit to make it prettier. But guys, that's really all there is to this. I mean, I can do anything I want just with this little bit of code that I showed you here. I can go into a database and I could pull all the code out, and each one I could have it assigned to another spot in my array. I could have all of this sent to a database. I could do anything I want. So I hope you see how powerful this can be and how useful it can be for you. And I guess that's all for now. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next segment.